So I am a cognitive psychologist. I study memory. My research is focused on how people learn true and false information from the world around them. And then once they do learn false information, what can we do to correct and fix those misconceptions? So this project, we were looking at the CrossCheck initiative. If you're not familiar with it, it's a collaborative journalism project that was run around the recent French election. A bunch of newsrooms in France got together, decided that kind of fact-checking was a public good, and so they were going to collaborate and produce these fact checks together. This is some of the partners that were involved in the project. They created these misinformation debunks, put them up on the web, and readers could get to them both from the CrossCheck website, plus from members' websites, and even some local newsrooms as well. So this is what the debunks looked like. There are all sorts of rumors that were kind of floating around in the French election. One of the rumors was actually the one about Macron's offshore bank account that Joan mentioned earlier. And what we did was pick 10 of those rumors, presented them to readers both in the US and then later in France, and looked at both whether or not they still believed the rumor after reading the debunk, but then we were also really interested in what did they actually remember from these debunks. We're presenting this information to people. Do they recall it? Is it having a lasting effect on them? How are they responding to them? So in each study, readers would first do pre-ratings, where they saw all 10 of the rumors, rated how accurate they thought the statements were. They'd then read one of the debunks, read the article on how Macron was not wearing an earpiece during the debate, re-rate the story, and then answer a bunch of memory questions relating to the story. So the ones I'm going to talk about here are questions about kind of the key details in the story. How did the rumor originate? How was it debunked? And kind of one other key piece of information from each story. So here's what we found. So these are the participants' accuracy ratings, where 0 is saying that the rumor is very inaccurate, 10 is saying it's very accurate. The French participants are in orange, and the US participants are in blue. You can see everyone starts out kind of not really knowing if the rumors are true or false. They're in the middle. Post-rating, everyone declines. These debunks do work. People think the rumors are less accurate after reading the debunks. But you can see it's much more effective in the society that doesn't already have preconceived notions, motivated reasoning, and other internal reasons not to believe what's in the debunk. One thing that's really important, though, is that we see no evidence of the backfire effect. So there's been a lot of talk about backfire effects and how presenting debunks might cause people to actually become more entrenched in their views. There's some evidence that that can occur in very specific situations, but on the whole, the research community now agrees that that's not really something we have to worry about. So for some participants, these aren't effective in that they stay at the same belief, but we don't see this kind of backfire. Other thing that's interesting is that 1 week later, when we went back to the participants in the US, they still remembered that these rumors were false. So we are having a lasting effect. 1 week later, there's still evidence of them having read these debunks. It's also interesting to look at their memory for those specific details. So this is the proportion correct for those 3 memory questions. The questions were 4 alternative, multiple choice. They were designed to be rather easy, but you can see that participants aren't that great. So both in the US and France, they're answering kind of half to 2/3 of the questions correctly. So even when people are reading these stories, they're not reading them carefully, deeply, in a way that they're really remembering all of it later on. We also tested whether or not we had the headline as a question or a statement. So did Macron have an earpiece during the debate, or Macron was not wearing an earpiece during the debate? And we saw no difference between those two types of headlines. Finally, one of the things that CrossCheck did was have logos over to the side that indicated which newsrooms had signed off on that particular debunk. And it was designed to kind of be a signal for credibility. The more logos that were there, maybe the more credible the debunk was. But what you can see is that that didn't actually have much an effect on these readers' credibility ratings. And this is within the French sample. But we've got pretty good reasons to think why it wasn't effective. And that's that participants didn't pay any attention to those logos over on the side. So whether there was 1 logo, 4 logos, or 7 logos, they thought there were about 3. So I think it's an important point that we need to pay attention to. What do we want readers to get out of this story or out of how we're presenting the story? And we need to design the features in a way that they'll actually pay attention and remember that. So in conclusions, we think that this general model of trying something and then going back in the lab to test it, refine it, and then throw it back out in the field again is really valuable. That researchers know a lot, practitioners know a lot, and by having this back and forth, we can really improve our situation here. The other takeaways are that culture matters. So you got much different results in France where they cared about these issues versus in the US. And then that readers ignore kind of all of the peripheral information. So we had some other questions about other peripheral information, like what type of misinformation was presented, and readers also weren't very good at that. So thank you.